Welcome back to Master 79. In this video we are working through ielts speaking part 2 and part 3 on the topic. Describe a time when you succeeded in doing something that was difficult. We will brainstorm it together, then hear a full Band 9 model performance, and then take all 6 part 3 questions in turn. One important note before we begin. Where this video says Band 9, that is our own assessment of the answer against the publicly available ielts band descriptors. It is not a certified examiner score. Use it as a model of technique, not as a guarantee. First, how part 2 actually works. The examiner hands you a card, a pencil, and a sheet of paper. You get 1 minute to prepare, and you should use every second of it. Then you speak for 1 to 2 minutes without interruption, and the examiner asks one short rounding off question at the end. Aim for 1 minute 45 to 2 minutes. Stopping after 50 seconds is the single most common part 2 mistake there is. Here is our card. Describe a time when you succeeded in doing something that was difficult. You should say what the difficult task was when you succeeded and how you overcame the difficulties. And explain how you felt when you succeeded. Notice that the final line, the explain line, is where most of the marks are hiding, and it is the line most candidates rush. Here is the planning method. I call it the 5S spine because you only write 5 words on that sheet of paper. Set up. What the task was and why it was hard for you specifically. Stakes. When it happened and what pushed you into doing it. Struggle. The obstacle, the low point, the thing that nearly stopped you. Success. The moment it worked, with one concrete detail. And so what? How you felt, going past the word happy to something more honest. 5 words. Everything else is recall, not invention. So let us brainstorm. Our candidate is going to talk about learning to swim, but not as a child. At 26, after nearly drowning in a lake at the age of 7. The trigger is a 1-kilometer charity swim that colleagues signed up for. The struggle is 3 weeks of doing nothing but breathing out underwater and then a plateau at month 4. The success is finishing in about 38 minutes last September. And the feeling is not pride, it is relief. Here is the key choice. Pick a difficulty that is psychological, not merely practical. It gives you far more to say when you reach the explain line. And here is the target language we are aiming to use. Written off as impossible. Genuinely terrified of deep water. Before my brain could talk me out of it. Refreshingly unsentimental. It required something. I plateaued badly and nearly quit. Turning up when I did not want to, and closing a loop that had been open for years. Notice that none of these are difficult words. They are ordinary words in unexpected combinations, and that is what Band 9 lexical resource actually sounds like. Now the model answer in 4 blocks. Block 1, the setup.
I'd like to talk about learning to swim, which sounds completely trivial until you realize I was 26 and genuinely terrified of deep water. The difficulty wasn't physical, it was psychological. I'd nearly drowned in a lake when I was 7, and after that I avoided water altogether. So by my mid-20s I had this ridiculous situation where I could give a presentation to 200 people without blinking, but I couldn't put my face in a swimming pool.
Block 2, the stakes. When it happened and what pushed the decision.
What pushed me into it was a charity open water swim my colleagues had signed up for, 1 kilometer in a lake 6 months away. I said yes before my brain could talk me out of it, which in hindsight was the only way it was ever going to happen. I'd written the whole thing off as impossible for nearly 20 years, so the decision had to be made quickly or not at all.
Block 3, the struggle. This is the longest section, and deliberately so.
Very slowly and with a lot of help. I found a coach who specialized in adult beginners, and she was refreshingly unsentimental about the whole thing. We spent the first 3 weeks doing nothing but standing in the shallow end and breathing out underwater, no swimming at all. It felt absurd at the time, but it required something. After that, it came in stages. Floating, then kicking, then the arms, then the whole stroke. I plateaued badly around month 4 and very nearly quit, and honestly, what got me through was just turning up on the days I didn't want to.
And block 4, the success and the so what. Listen for how the feeling is described.
I finished the swim on a grey morning last September in about 38 minutes, which was slower than almost everybody else and completely irrelevant to me. And as for how I felt, the honest answer is that the overwhelming emotion wasn't pride, it was relief. There was this very quiet sense of having closed a loop that had been open for 19 years. I'd always assumed success would fill out. It didn't. It felt like putting something heavy down.
So why does that performance score at the top? 4 bullets answered in order, without ever sounding like a list. One story told in scenes rather than summarized. Concrete details, an age, a distance, a time, a month, which make it credible. A feeling that is specific and slightly unexpected. And natural self-correction, which sounds fluent rather than memorized. Remember, the technique transfers. The story does not. Use your own. Now part 3. This is a 4 to 5 minute discussion, thematically linked to your part 2 card. The questions move away from you and towards people in general, so your answers become abstract rather than personal. Aim for 40 to 60 seconds per answer. Not 10 seconds, and not 3 minutes. And if the examiner interrupts or pushes back, that is completely normal. It is not a penalty. Every answer that follows uses the same shape: position, reason, example or contrast, qualifier. Question 1. Is it easy to become a successful person? Before answering, notice the trap. The word easy invites a one-word reply. Instead, we gently refuse the premise. The difficulty is often misdiagnosed. People blame effort, but starting position matters more, and the real test is whether you can survive a failure. Here is the band 9 answer.
Not especially, no, though I think the difficulty is often misdiagnosed. People assume the barrier is effort, and effort certainly matters, but a great deal of it comes down to starting position. Who you know, what you can afford to risk, or whether you can survive a failure. Somebody with a financial cushion can have 3 bad years and recover, somebody without one simply can't. So I'd say success is achievable for most people, but it costs different people wildly different amounts.
Question 2. Would you do charity when you succeed? The weak answer is simply yes. The strong answer says yes, and then distrusts its own easy yes. We contrast writing checks with giving time, and we admit the genuinely hard part, which is consistency. Here is the band 9 answer.
I'd like to think so, though I'm slightly wary of how that question usually gets answered. Everybody says yes in the abstract. What I'd hope to do is something rather less glamorous than writing checks. Giving time, or teaching, or funding one specific person consistently rather than scattering small donations around. I think targeted, boring, sustained giving does far more good than the dramatic kinds. It's also much harder to keep up, which is probably why fewer people do it.
Question 3. Is there a lot of competition with others trying to achieve the same goals? We answer yes, but we upgrade it. Not just a lot, but intensified. Then we make a distinction between competition for positions and competition for quality, and that distinction is what lifts the answer. Here is the Band 9 answer.
Enormously, and I think it's intensified rather than just continued. Social media has made everybody's ambitions visible, so you're not really competing locally anymore. A graphic designer in Hanoi is quoting against somebody in Warsaw for the same client. That said, I distinguish between competition for positions, which is genuinely fierce, and competition for quality, which honestly isn't. Most fields have far more people who want the reward than people doing the unglamorous work, so the crowd thins out surprisingly quickly.
Question 4. Do young people today face a lot of difficult decisions? Here we reframe. The difficulty has not simply increased, it has changed shape. Previous generations had few options and brutal consequences. This generation has too many options and no obvious way to choose. Here is the Band 9 answer.
They do, but I'd argue the difficulty has changed shape rather than simply increased. My grandparents faced decisions with brutal consequences and very few options. You took the job that existed. Young people now face almost the opposite problem: an overwhelming number of options and no obvious way to choose between them. Career paths that didn't exist 5 years ago, the possibility of living almost anywhere. That's a privilege, obviously, but abundance creates its own paralysis, and I think that's genuinely underestimated.
Question 5. What factors influence people's choices about difficult decisions? The organizing idea is a split between the reasons people state and the reasons that are actually operating. Money and prospects on the surface. Family expectation, fear of regret, and peer norms underneath. Here is the Band 9 answer.
A whole mixture, and I suspect the stated reasons and the real reasons often differ. Officially, people cite money, career prospects, practicalities, all the respectable things. Underneath that, though, you'll usually find family expectation, fear of regrets, and a very strong pull towards whatever their peer group considers normal. Timing matters as well. The same person will make a completely different decision at 22 and at 35 purely because their tolerance for risk has shifted.
Question 6. How do people make difficult decisions? We open with a claim that has some bite. Far less rationally than they would admit. Pros and cons lists are justification, not analysis. Then we offer a better method, which is to imagine yourself a year into each option. Here is the Band 9 answer.
Far less rationally than they'd ever admit, I think. The textbook approach is to list the pros and cons and weigh them up, and people do go through that ritual. But in my experience, it functions as justification rather than analysis. They've already leaned one way and they're quietly building a case for it. What seems to work better is imagining yourself a year into each option and noticing which one you feel relief about. It's gut instinct dressed up as a method, essentially, but is surprisingly reliable.
Here is the full language bank from this video, grouped so you can lift it directly into your own answers. Framing a story. Struggle and persistence. Feelings described precisely. Taking a position in part 3. And hedging with nuance. Pause the video here and copy these down. Then, and this is the important part, use each one in a sentence about your own life today, or you will not remember it tomorrow. And finally, against the 4 criteria, fluency and coherence. Speaks at length without noticeable effort, and the story is sequenced so the listener never has to reconstruct it. Lexical resource. Idiomatic and precise, used naturally rather than decoratively. Grammatical range and accuracy. A wide range of flexible structures with errors that are rare and minor. And pronunciation. Sustained natural stress and intonation, effortless to follow. Once again, Band 9 here is our own assessment against the public descriptors, not a certified examiner score. Now your turn, and please actually do this one. Set a timer for 1 minute and write only the 5 S words. Then record yourself speaking for 2 full minutes with no script. Play it back and mark every place where you stopped early. Then answer all 6 Part 3 questions at 50 seconds each. If this helped, subscribe to bmaster79 for a new Band 9 walkthrough every week. See you in the next one.